Morning to you, and thank you for joining us. You're tuned in and listening to Smooth 98.1, Smooth Breakfast with Valentine Ohu.
And Ayo Mairo Ese. Good morning.
Thank you, and please join us to welcome Nnamdi into the studio. Nnamdi, good morning.
Hello, Lagos. How are you?
Very well, good to see you, sir.
Thank you.
And Wade Ahimie is at reinknigeria. Good morning.
Good morning, Lagos.
Wow, good morning. That was a very nice good morning.
Very enthusiastic.
Thank you for joining us. You obviously had a good weekend, Wade.
Yes, I did.
Nice. Good to hear. Please join the conversation by sending us messages through WhatsApp 0809 444 0981. That is the WhatsApp number.
On Twitter, we're at Smooth981FM. Kindly use the hashtag freshlypressed981. On YouTube, we're streaming live. Kindly go on there to Smooth981FM and use the live chat option to send us messages.
Our first story is from Thisday newspaper. Nnamdi. The presidency has come out to justify Sowore's rearrest, saying he's a person of interest to the Department of State Services. They stated that Sowore's rearrest was, on the allegations that he was planning a revolution to overthrow a democratically elected government in Nigeria. I thought that was, the first allegation that came, for his first arrest, but they're saying he still has that intention. And most of the allegations are just surrounding his latest statements on the point of release on bail. Your thoughts on this?
I mean, very often, I think that the stories that I'm asked to dissect on this program, I'm asked to do so in my capacity as a lawyer.
Yes.
But let's step outside all of that just for a second as Nigerians. Let's try to talk to people who, in their day-to-day lives, hope not to be apprehended by security operatives and then held indefinitely without recourse to the proper channels of justice. This is somebody whose bail has been ordered on multiple occasions and he has just been released. Now he's in court. And we've all seen the videos, right? We saw what happened. Yeah. I don't know if you've handled this perhaps on the program.
Well, we did.
This happened
on
Saturday, right?
On Friday.
Okay, after the
Friday
program,
evening,
obviously. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
We've all seen the videos.
In fact, Friday morning we had a feel-good story. That was the first story. So, Sowore has been released.
Wow.
Happy, congratulations. Later in the evening, that happened.
I don't know. I mean, I wasn't a lawyer in that time, but from everything I've heard, even under military dictatorship from the 60s to the 90s, law and order was respected inside the courtroom,
True.
But the nature of what we saw on people's videos posted on social media was beyond the pale. I think that this is the lowest ebb thus far, I don't want to comment on the president's justification of Sowore's rearrest or on the rest of the story where
Would you
DSS
just mention what his justification, just at least for
they said he's a person of interest planning a revolution, right? I mean, it's the same thing they've been saying over and over, that he's a menace and thus has to be kept off the streets.
Also said,
and the government reserves the right to do this and to do that.
So in essence, it's
But let's not give vent to empty words. Let's not give vent to the ideas of a regime that completely run counter to everything that we have stood for and that some people have fought for. I want to just speak on this in that vein. This is completely wrong, in my opinion. It's wrong, it's illegal, it's against the letter and the spirit of the same constitution that they're invoking in trying to justify these actions. And I really do think that for those right-minded members of the government the day who have seen this and who have perhaps some bearing on the actions of the DSS, the time is now to fall back in line. All right.
Emeka from Ikeja reacts to this. He says the government needs to be careful with Fowler. He's a veteran in these kind of asymmetrical warfare. So there was really no invasion of the courtroom. He got information that the DSS had laid siege and waiting to pounce outside the hallowed premises of the courtroom. He quickly organized the shard.
No,
interesting.
Really? Very interesting.
Nah.
A lot of people are also operating on hearsay at the moment.
We know that the judge that was supposed to be, presiding over that case at the time, Justice Ifeoma Ojukwu, She was said to have run for cover.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know if run is the word, obviously,
Yes.
but if you see operatives of the DSS in your court and
It
you're
was
trying to
a
conduct
Gestapo style
proceedings,
invasion.
yes, and the court proceedings have been truncated by their entry, if you want to call it invasion or whatever, then
Yeah.
obviously you have to leave. What else are you doing?
So the courtroom is supposed to be hallowed chamber.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, you're not
Except-
even allowed to carry firearms on a
And
good day.
apparently, other reports in other news dailies stated that the federal government said they had apologized to the judge sitting. So to say
Yeah, I
that
heard that
it
on
was
the news this
organized,
morning
no,
as well,
that's
yeah.
no, that's wrong information. Right, I'll go on to Dr. Aya CMS, who says the spin by the presidency, DSS, and the supporters is maddening. Has this government shown respect for the judiciary since inception? Terrible.
All right, let's go to our next story very quickly from Vanguard newspaper. It is against the law to actually $13 billion loan. We're talking about power, transport, works ministries as those agencies or departments really that will take this lion's share. Daily Times reports on this one. We're still talking about this loan. I know from my last read in the Punch newspaper, I picked it up yesterday morning. I saw a report that, senators giving reasons why they declined to assent to the president's request on this loan, saying the budget is already running into a deficit. They had to add some extra amounts in it. And they do not think collectively that this is a good move by the federal government. But what are your thoughts as they seem to have justified this, where this money is going to be going into, Mambila Power Project being one of them?
Well, when we talk about the Mambila Power Project, we already know that there is a dispute on that because we had spoken about it some time back.
Mm-hmm.
However, when you look at the loan profile of Nigeria over the last 3 years, it's grown between 2016 July and 2019 July. It's grown by 141% from about 11.26 billion to about 27.162 billion. Now, I know we require money for infrastructure, which is necessary. However, taking this loan, the first question we need to find out is, are we sure that you're going to implement this project? Because if you look at the last statement of Ngalale, he says he also added that if the loan is secured and projects are successfully completed, this is the biggest problem. We take these loans and these projects are never successfully completed. So the next government comes in and he has to pay both the loans and the interest. But just by adding another 30 billion to this loan, based on the 27.16 billion that we are on now, we'll be increasing Nigeria's debt profile by another 110%. And if we look at it from totality between July 2016 and adding this loan, if we do take it today, it means that we would have increased the external debt profile by 477%, which is humongous in a country where we're struggling to raise revenue, and we're continually trying to fund deficit budgets where 40% of the budget comes out as recurrent expenditure, if not more. So why do we need to take this loan? Are we going to really put it into because all these things that we're talking about, the power sector, the Mambila project, the education funds and all,
are they necessary things that need to be funded?
Yes, they are. And I agree that
if you got a guarantee that this $30 billion will go, there's a system in place that would show you that it's watertight. It's a tracking mechanism that has been put in place to ensure that these monies, every single dime, is being placed into execution of this project. Would you approve of it?
I would. Yes, technically I would approve of it. However, antecedents has shown that no matter the amount of guarantee that we're giving, we still don't see these monies in the infrastructure.
So what would you like to be done differently, since you agree that these are projects that need funding?
So one of the things that can be done, especially working with the institutions that are providing these loans, is ensuring that the institutions themselves monitor these projects and they are being carried out and being done. So that at every point in time, the milestones for payments actually go based on projects reaching those milestones, and not just putting 30 billion into Nigerians' hands and then we tomorrow we hear the project started but it's been abandoned somewhere.
Obviously, we know from the way they've been operating. I'm talking about the China Exim Bank and the other parties who are contributing to this fund. We know that the World Bank as well, they send representatives, they appoint certain individuals within their establishments to monitor, especially as these monies are disbursed in tranches, like you said. Thank you very much, Wadi, for your thoughts. let's move over to this next story from this day newspaper, Nnamdi. AMCON, the asset management company of Nigeria, or corporation rather, they are actually saying they have attributed the frequent failure of airlines to high taxes and charges. These are the things that we know. Mr. Ahmed Kuru, who's the managing director, chief executive officer of the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria, attributed these failures, attributed the frequent failures to these things. He said it really leads to unstable air travel markets. It causes, it's inimical to the policies and self-destructive actions of the airlines. We know that the federal government has been looking for ways, though not as actively as we would hope, for the operations of these airlines to be streamlined, for first of all, the regulators to have the wherewithal to do their work properly. The airports, we know they lack basic amenities. A lot of our airports, especially the international ones, which is sad, the runways need maintenance, and poor maintenance has been the reason why, it's been declining over the years. What are your thoughts on this story? How is this different from the rhetoric?
I don't know that it's vastly different, but it is interesting to shine a spotlight on some of these issues from time to time. Mr. Ahmed Kuru is basically saying, as you said, a number of things that we've already become accustomed to in this jurisdiction. Indigenous carriers rise and fall at an alarming rate. Over the course of 5-10 years, a carrier might appear and disappear, or established airlines might suddenly go under. I mean, aero contractors till this day are not so certain how they continue to operate functionally, because I know that at some point they were supposed to have collapsed. But what he's saying is that the high taxes and overbearing charges by regulatory agencies and generally create an unstable and unpredictable environment for these airlines. But he's also saying there are other factors. And if I'm to hazard a guess, I think some of those are high cost of aviation fuel. As mentioned in the story, the craziness of our foreign exchange markets.
Yeah.
Because I understand that there are two windows. And then he mentions financial rascality. And when he mentions that, he brings to mind some of the stories that have been swirling about Alan Onyema. I don't know, is he Chief Alan Onyema, the CEO of Airpeace, and how he came into funds and how he has been running his organization. I don't want to double, since it's not part of the story, I don't want to go too deep into that. But the entire point of that is that for the longest time I was wondering, where did Airpeace come from? One day they did not exist. The next day they were the most widely used air services operator in the country. And suddenly now you hear that they've been indicted on certain charges in a foreign jurisdiction, and you wonder exactly what's going on. So the entire point of this story, I think, is to show that the aviation industry should be a driver of the economy of any country.
Yes.
And I suppose it has been in Nigeria. Air freight and air cargo services and just general movement of passengers from one place to the other has improved because we have access to aircraft and all those services and so in Nigeria. If you check it, right, on any good day, at any given time, I can wake up and decide, listen, I want to go to Abuja. In particular destinations, choice destinations, Abuja, Owerri, Port Harcourt, Lagos, where actual business gets done.
Not really. In some parts, the reason I'm saying that is because we have seen the number of carriers shrink.
Yeah.
If you go to the airports, you can, it's almost as if that if the one you mentioned, when they go out of business, we're in real trouble, because there are a number of aircraft that have been grounded. A number of them have reduced the number of flights. If you want to book a flight to Port Harcourt, it's usually full. You can't dare walk to the airport and say you want to book on a Friday or a Sunday from Port Harcourt. So it's something that we need to look into. Talking about the economic benefits of.
Yes, the economic benefits of air travel, and I also like a situation where this norm, the thing that's becoming a normal, has become a norm, can change. Having because we know that most of these trumped up charges are being passed down to the customers, the consumer, the people who we pay for this flight ticket. I'm checking a ticket to Abuja one way, 27,727 on a local flight. Once upon a time, not too long ago, 2 years ago, I remember paying 15,000 naira for the same trip. Why is it practical for the government in a drive to subsidize a lot of things? Can the government, would you think it's practical for the government to subsidize aviation fuel just so they can take off some of this costs?
I mean, I can't comment on economics in that sense, but just if you think about it, Nigeria's exchange rate now and at the time when you were paying 15,000 naira for a ticket. Vastly different. There's an ocean of difference between those two eras. That's part one. Part two is a lot of what the aviation industry does, a lot of the business they do is in dollars and foreign currency. And so they're going to take massive hits. Second thing is, I recall speaking to somebody recently who said that for profitability on an airline, there's a certain quota you have to fill on each flight.
That's true.
Which sometimes explains why the airlines delay. Because they want to have their flights at a certain level. Otherwise, they necessarily cannot function. And if they can't function, I mean, it's not even just a case of passing down the cost to the passenger. They're going to go into debt, as a lot of them have of recent. Now, what I meant by air travel being a driver of the economy, or having been a driver of the economy in Nigeria, is I'm not talking about maybe the last 5 years, in which obviously the impact has varied. But I mean, if you check from, say, the 90s to now, I think we can safely say that there's been an uptick that has been beneficial to everyone. So, yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So Shegun is of the opinion that unlike past governments, this government is actually carrying out infrastructural projects. It will take time to be completed, considering our infrastructural deficit. If the loan will be put to good use, then it will be fine.
And Nisi says, well, the good thing is, if the story about Ahimie is true, at least the money is multiplying inside of Nigeria. I'm sure if all the embezzled money in Nigeria circulated inside Nigeria, we would have a better economy than we have now. What is bad is bad.
I really don't understand.
It seems to be true, because those still are allegations and they're yet to be proven in court. But let's move on.
All right, let's move on to our next story. Wadi, I'll come to you. Government under fire for withholding unemployment data from public. Now, this report from The Guardian says that 3 weeks to the end of the year, the quarterly reports on job creation and unemployment prepared by the National Bureau of Statistics have not been made available to the public, contrary to the usual practice. Indeed, the last time a report was released was in the third quarter of 2018, and at the time you announced that the country's unemployment figure had risen to about 23.1%. We don't need to detail the effects of employment, of the rate of employment over on the country, and just to take us through the story, Wade.
We all know that these numbers haven't been released in the last 1 year, and I don't know whether it's deliberate, and which is what the story seems to be saying, that it's like it's a deliberate attempt by government for people not to know what the unemployment rate is. But I think it was about 2 weeks ago when I was listening to the finance show in the morning, and they were talking about this. I saw an article by NECA which said that Nigeria's unemployment rate will be between 33 and 35% by the end of the year. That's those who are really not working. But if you add the underemployed to it, so we'll be looking at something over 40%, which I think this story is trying to lay out. But it is important that these statistics are always released. Why? It helps people plan. It helps people know what labor force is available in the system. But if we don't know this, really, and also when you look at the growing rate of unemployment, it seems to be going from the bottom side. A lot of people who are coming out of schools and finishing services, youth service, don't get employment. A number of reasons for that. No experience, companies are shutting down. So even small businesses that would employ some of those people normally are really closing down their businesses because of the cost of doing business. So the economy generally, but I think it's something that government needs to look into, share it with the populace so that people know. Investors would know if they need to invest in a business, if what kind of employment opportunities will be available for the people, what kind of experience people you have in the system that you need to bring on board, and so on and so forth. But it's sad that a year after we don't know really how many people are unemployed in Nigeria, and people are losing jobs every day.
To be fair though, without the official records coming out, Wade, when we look at the rate of growth in terms of the number of people who are employable, this report actually details that. We know that, and the fact that we don't have jobs, we can almost ascertain that the rate of unemployment has increased.
Oh yes, Yes, we can.
What are we doing about this? How will we arrest the situation? Because we don't, before we wait for statistics to come out, what is being done?
The major challenge for employment is the economic situation. Businesses are shutting down, so it's difficult to arrest that if government policy doesn't drive what's it called, opportunities for business to grow.
Yeah.
And which we've seen, cost of everything is gone up. And like Nnamdi said earlier on, even in the aviation that Valentine was saying we're paying 15,000 a couple of years ago, is now 27,000. The exchange rate has doubled over that period.
Yes.
And when this happens, a lot of the transactions we do is based on a lot of imports and it's dollar based. So exactly, these are the things that are going to happen. So it's difficult, except the government puts in an economic stimulant that will drive the economy back up, and then more and more people can employ, even if it's one or two people to do business for them.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to just link this to the report by the World Bank, which we took, I think it was last week, with regards to the number of, the rising level of poverty, people living in extreme poverty in Nigeria, which the government rejected, by the way.
Sorry, can I just point out this is a funny part of the story that I've just seen. Sorry, I'm jumping in on what they said.
No, it's fine.
It says we have created at least 12 million jobs in the area of agriculture, Shehu said. The chief executive officer of NDS, Ayo Mairo Ese, said the bureau was too cash-strapped to provide regular updates until now. As in, the thing just off me.
Too cash-strapped to
the
write
Nigerian Bureau of Statistics said they've been too cash-strapped to provide the reports up.
Honestly, that has been something they've been crying about for a while.
For a long time.
I mean, but I'm not even laughing at
they're on the
gentleman Ayo Mairo Ese. I'm laughing at the fact that we have a government, or we have a situation in the country where the NBS cannot tell you what's up because they don't get money. It's a fantastically extraordinary thing.
It is extraordinary to you, but when you have a government that has been questioned, most of their moves have been put to question regarding statistics and the lack of accurate numbers for us to use to plan better. So it wouldn't come as a surprise that the National Bureau of Statistics is underfunded. It is not, and those guys try.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, they do actually.
Ojo or Ladile on YouTube says, on the airline issue, most of the airlines that collapse they are mainly due to mismanagement. Some airlines will bring expatriates and keep them in hotels for months. You can imagine the expense. While that may be true on a surface level, it actually goes beyond that, because other companies spend so much more on hospitality.
Absolutely. Let's move on. Talking about money, unemployment, lack of money for NBS. Well, it seems like even though we don't have money for statistics, we have a lot for pensions for governors who have served in the past. So according to the New Telegraph, we won't scrap pension benefits for Tinubu, Fashola, Ambode. So the Lagos State House of Assembly has declared it will not repeal the state pension law permitting former governors and other public office holders to receive juicy pensions from state coffers. This is a very interesting report, Nnamdi. One of the things you also note I'd like to point out is Zamfara State has actually repealed that, so they do not pay pensions to former governors who have served. Please, can you take us through the story?
I'm always a little concerned when some of these stories break or some of these issues happen and there's rejoicing. I do suppose that there's been a outcry ever since, I don't know how long ago we discovered that former governors were receiving these hefty pension packages from their states even after they're out of office, and there was this debate in the public and all of that. But obviously what's happened in Zamfara is heavily politicized. I'm always a little wary of politicized situations. I'm sure we also, the letter, I don't know how authentic it is, that circulated on social media from the former governor, writing from the office of the former executive governor to the current governor with respect to this issue. I think, though, that the reasoning of the Lagos State Assembly is pretty sound. They're saying that they're entitled to legislate in accordance with, with their status as representatives of Lagos State, Lagos State's people. They have the powers as enshrined in the Constitution to do what they have just done. I'm inclined to, toe that line. But again, I do wonder, I haven't seen this judgment that is referenced in this story. The News Agency of Nigeria is reporting that the Federal High Court had ordered the federal government to recover pensions collected by former governors now serving as ministers and members of the National Assembly. I haven't seen that. I don't know what the actual import is. Sometimes you have these stories that
Yes.
summarized in a way that is more palatable or digestible by the general public, but then the nuance is lost
Yes.
in the summary. So I'd have to look at that to determine exactly what happened. But like I said, what the Lagos State Assembly is saying that there is a public office holder payment of pension law number 11 in the official Gazette of Lagos State 2007, which empowers the state to pay former governors and deputy governors of the state. But I'll run you through, this pension package. It's quite interesting. The law makes provision for 6 new cars every 3 years, 100% of their basic salary while serving, which is 7.7 million naira per annum, as well as free healthcare for them and members of their family. As part of the package, former public office holders are also entitled to furniture allowance at 300% of annual basic salary, house maintenance allowance, utility allowance, car maintenance allowance, other benefits like the attachment of 8 policemen and 2 operatives of the dreaded DSS are part of their entourage. So, it's very interesting.
For life.
For life.
I would assume so, yes.
That's a very
That's what
robust.
pension they do now.
I'll just very quick question because of our time. So for governors, e.g., Uzor Kalu, who have been convicted, or who have been convicted or are facing graft charges, do they get rewarded for their time in office, having embezzled money or having having participated in corrupt practices?
My good friend Wale looks very interested in that question, so I think
What
I'm
do
going
you
to
think about that? So for governors who have been indicted or who are currently facing charges in court, should they still be entitled to such packages?
Nnamdi is a lawyer, but for
I like how both of you are just tossing it back.
No.
Let me ask you
No.
as a citizen of
as a
Nigeria.
citizen of
Yes.
Nigeria,
Wow.
first and foremost, if you committed a crime against Nnamdi, correct me if I'm wrong, some of these benefits you no longer have them except you have a pardon, and then that pardon is properly signed by the president and says, okay, fine, we've pardoned him and he's been excused of all previous crimes and he's back to a normal citizen. But if that is the case, then he shouldn't be entitled to it. But even in terms of this pension, just the last thing to say, it's amazing that people who are elected by the people, who spend 4 years or 8 years, as the case may be, are you with me, award themselves huge pensions and allowances. And people who spend so many years in working for the civil service
yes.
never get their peanuts that are due to them.
Thank you for that point, Wade. All right, let's quickly move on to this one.
Yes, Ayok says, how in goodness's name, or how in God's name, is the pension package justified in one of the poorest countries in the world? I'm surprised. Shegun said, how many states have these governorship pensions? Dr. I says, Lagos State, the best openly run state in Nigeria. All states should learn from them. The ex-governors deserve their loot. Said the woke Lagos public supports this law.
Dr. I think that's tongue in cheek.
Very enjoyable oxymoron.
Okay, let's move on very quickly, Wade, just to touch on this. Nigerian agencies failed to remit 20 billion naira VAT, other taxes in 2017, according to an audit report from the Premium Times. Please go ahead.
So the Office of the Auditor General did some audits and found out that a few of the departments were not remitting collections on behalf of government, withholding taxes, value-added taxes, stamp duties, and a number of them. In total, about 19 billion were not remitted, of which the Bureau for Public Enterprises topped the list with 7.6 billion, and a number of other MDAs. The question here is, for me, is this: since you have a single treasury single account, and all this money is going, and before these monies are released from these things, you should have a clear analysis of what makes up that money, and any payment that is made, whether to the bureaus or to collection agencies that relate to taxes, should be the first things that should be deducted, and the balance is what is paid out. Now, what is going on with this? So, if from what he says, that some of the agencies are inflating, in quotes, inflating their expenditure towards reducing their surpluses, and this for me is something that has to be checked into as a whole.
Thank you.
All
very
right,
much.
thank you. With what is analysis, we'll bring it to an end today for the conversation of Freshly Pressed 981 in the studio, but we'll take it further on social media. Twitter is at Smooth981FM. Special thanks to Nnamdi Ake for stepping in. Good morning, thank you.
Thank you
And
so
one
much.
is at reinknigeria on Twitter. Lego, stay tuned. In 15 minutes, we switch lanes to talk sports, mostly highlighting Joshua and Riz's fight over the weekend. Stay with us.
Olufemi of life.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The headlines.